Well, hello there, guys. And today we're going to be reviewing Here, which is the new Robert Zemeckis film starring Tom Hanks, Paul Bettany, and Robin Wright. But before I get into the weeds of the film, I want to thank you guys so much for checking out my last two videos. I really appreciate it. So yeah, let's get into this review for Here. Before I actually get into the weeds of the review, I want to say that Robert Zemeckis' career has been kind of been spotty for the past couple of years. He's been doing a lot of crazy shit like Pinocchio. He also did Welcome to Marwen, which we don't talk about. We don't even talk about The Witches from the pandemic times, the dark evil times. And also I would like to mention Mars Needs Moms. Yeah, he didn't direct that, but his production team did it. So yeah, we don't talk about that. But even then, he's done other films that have been classics, like the Back to the Future movies, Castaway, The Polar Express, Forrest Gump, Flight, and other films that I really enjoyed, like Roger Rabbit and Death Becomes Her, and even Contact. So this guy has been directing a lot of great bangers in his early career, and then once he transitioned into the mocap stuff, things started to get worse and worse, and now we're here with Here. So let me set the premise real quick. So you have this family who inherits a home from a past generation, and the whole entire movie is set in a fixed camera position where you see only the living room. And throughout the entire movie, you just see the family going in and out of the living room, living their lives, going through typical American family emotions like taxes, death, and divorce. And throughout the entire film, Tom Hanks and Robin Wright are a couple at first. They meet at high school, which you don't see, but they're played just like normal 40-year-olds in a weird teenage body, which is completely uncanny, which I will mention a lot more as I progress into this review. But yeah, Robin Wright and Tom Hanks, they are together. They're having trouble with their marriage. They eventually have a kid, and there's other family stuff happening with Paul Bettany, who's the grandfather, and he's going through the motions of coming towards his end of his life, and his wife is also dealing with dementia and eventually becomes a stroke victim and then eventually dies, and it's a whole thing. And just a lot of stuff is happening all in just this one enclosed area. And at first it's a really interesting kind of take on the idea of the American dream and the American family, where you see obviously in these types of films dealing with the themes, you see just everybody going through different motions of American life, either from the outside but not in the inside or in one enclosed area. And I think this is an interesting take on that thematic. And I think Robert Zemeckis, for most of the movie, tries to really convey that emotion throughout the entire film. But unfortunately, on that paper, it doesn't translate completely. And I think it's probably because it's based on a graphic novel or a graphic panel, which had the entire landscape of the centuries of this one house and how the house became populated by different people across generations, but it's in one panel. But here in the movie, it's portrayed again in that one enclosed area, but you do get to see panels of past generations, as you get to see the dinosaurs getting killed by a giant asteroid. You get to see the Native Americans hang out in that same area where the house is being plotted, and then it transitions to another family before the Tom Hanks family, where you see the two couples trying to live their lives, and one of them is trying to build a recliner, which is eventually going to be called the Lazy Boy. And it transitions forward to the young family, which is the Tom Hanks family, and then you get to see their whole life, and then it ends exactly where it's supposed to end in real time. But that's just the positives of what this film is trying to do. I commend the actual experimentation of the idea of staying in this enclosed area, but I think on paper it doesn't translate completely, and it kind of leads into a stilted and kind of one note dimension. And the negatives behind this film is mostly dealing with the concept of AI and how it's being portrayed in this film. Because when you start watching the movie, you eventually get to see a lot of the mishaps and missteps of utilizing the AI and deepfake technology throughout the film. As in the beginning, Tom Hanks is de-aged as a teenager, but he has his old face, but it's a little bit younger, but it's still feels like older Tom Hanks as he's like stiltily moving across like the living room, and it's very awkward, and you get to see like this, like the weird kind of like stiltness of like the faces as they're trying to like contort and like make emotions, but it's like blank from what I saw. And it's mostly a lot of these different characters that have like that same stiltedness throughout the entire movie, and it's annoying and it's very like jarring. And even then, like the nonlinear structure of going back and forth between few families who lived in the house before and after the young family is very jarring, and it takes a while to really like tap into that nonlinear structure, because it was very frustrating kind of like jumping back and forth between different timelines when it could have been just like, you know, straightforward. But I understand what Robert Zemeckis was trying to do with that kind of thematic. But again, it doesn't really work, and it doesn't really mesh with a lot of like the stuff that's happening. And even then, a lot of stuff that is actually happening is mostly like vignettes of different periods of these families' lives in this like one living room. And sometimes it's like very like generic and very like predictable, and other times it kind of just doesn't flesh out a lot of those like storylines. It's just like a small glimpse here, a small glimpse there, a small glimpse here, and a small glimpse there, and then it just ends. And I think this whole like idea of just doing like that kind of like off sales the entire film. But I will say, positively speaking, the performances are still fine. I think Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, they do the best that they can. But I really think Paul Bettany is like the MVP in this movie, because he really loses himself in the character of the grandfather, and how he's kind of like dealing with like the emotions of losing his wife and then eventually losing himself as he gets older. And I think Paul Bettany really conveyed that emotion throughout, even though he's like caked up in like deep fake makeup and trying to like contort his like own body. And he's the only, I think, person who really tries to like act like an older person in a younger body, and vice versa, compared to Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. But even then, I feel like this movie, again, on paper, it sounds interesting, but the execution itself isn't inspiring or very new. But I do, again, have to commend Robert Zemeckis for at least trying to make something salvageable with just like a one panel like graphic comic that's only literally just like one panel. I think that's like a really interesting like thing that he did. And unfortunately the film ends in like a really like breakthrough moment, and it ends in like a break in the immersion of the idea of like this one setting, and it pretty much defeats the purpose of the experimental theme throughout the entire film. But yeah, I gave this a 2 out of 5. It's fine. A lot of older people are going to be like really tapped into this, because it's probably going to speak to those types of generational people. And I think younger people, you can see a little bit of kind of like the angst behind a lot of these characters throughout the film. But again, it didn't work for me, and it's kind of like a missed failure. But I don't think it's like the worst Zemeckis film in his like filmography. I still think The Witches, Pinocchio, and Welcome to Marvin are just like the trifecta of like dog shit like Robert Zemeckis movies. But yeah, in terms of Oscar like prospects, this is getting nothing. Not even like production design. Like from what I'm like looking at, sure, the production design it's pretty neat, and there's a lot of like visual like callbacks to a lot of like the items that were placed around like the living room. But other than that, like that's basically it. Like the costuming is pretty like basic, and I think the performances are not strong enough to like convey any kind of Oscar prediction. So yeah, I think that's like my only like 2 cents with that. But yeah, I kind of didn't like this movie, but it's fine. It's whatever. We'll get him next time. We'll get another like great Robert Zemeckis movie. I know he has something in him. Maybe he needs to do another Back to the Future movie, or something that can be more palatable to wider audiences. But yeah, this is just fine. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Take care. Peace out.